For anybody who's been in Bangalore for the last 1 year, you've probably gotten tired of the rains, but maybe it's a sign of good things to come when you actually think about India's G20 presidency. India has just assumed the presidency very recently, and it's going to be organizing a lot of meetings across various cities in India. This video is presented by the Indian Institute of Science, which is the secretariat for the Science20 vertical of the G20. It's really interesting because it's one of the newest verticals of the G20, which was started in 2017 in Germany. And I'm joined by such an eminent personality who can perhaps add a lot of perspective to where India is headed in terms of its science and technology achievements going forward in the future. My guest today is Sir Robin Grimes. Sir Robin Grimes was the new Nuclear Chief Scientific Advisor to the Ministry of Defence. He's a Professor of Material Physics at Imperial College London Foreign Office in the United Kingdom, and he's going to give us a lot of perspective on these S20 meetings and how science in India has grown so far. I hope you enjoy this interview. Hello, a very good evening. I'm here with Sir Robin Grimes in JNCASR campus in Bangalore. A lovely weather and a lovely day for a conversation.
Very English weather.
Very English weather. Thank you so much, Professor. First of all, how may I address you?
Oh, Robin. Robin, just
Robin
fine.
is fine?
Yes, of course it is. Yes.
So tell us about your visits to India and, how do you enjoy your visits to India?
I mean, obviously, I love coming to India. I've been here many, many times. I actually came here first with my wife when I think we were 31 years old, and we were backpackers on the train.
Is that so?
We did. We
Right.
actually did do that backpack thing.
Right.
But we also visited some universities, and I actually gave a science talk as well. So we weren't proper backpackers.
Right. And I saw your Twitter timeline, and then it was filled with tuk-tuks and rickshaws and your late night metro rides. So
Absolutely.
It looks like you've already gotten the feel of Bangalore.
I have. Well, I've got old friends here who I've been visiting for a very long time. And in fact, here at this institution, I've just given a lecture yesterday, which is at a winter school. So this was to do with teaching undergraduates and PhD students in particular about a particular aspect of computer simulation. Actually, it's a really wonderful event that is held every 2 years here. And both Indian scientists and British scientists have come together for, I think it's over 10 years, to present this material to the PhD students.
And how do you think has been the history of collaboration between India and the UK? I'm sure there's a rich legacy as well, some troubled parts of it as well.
Well, of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a particularly strong collaboration in my area of using computers to predict the way that materials behave.
Right.
So India and the UK have been collaborating for a few generations of academics and students together. So to be honest, we're so used to working together and teaching together and organising conferences together that I think the history is something that we perhaps forget about.
Right.
But history is important.
As students of geopolitics, we are taught about different forms of diplomacy.
Yeah.
And science diplomacy was perhaps mentioned in the passing. And that was a bit of a shocker for all of us because obviously India has produced some of the greatest institutions in the world.
And great scientists.
And great scientists as well. But now we are glad to see that science R&D is being given that sort of importance. So what do you think makes for a very good environment to assimilate and create that sort of, ground for scientific research?
Well, and I mean, I think when you look around you here today, it's the ability for scientists to be comfortable. I'm a big fan of the idea that scientists need time to talk to each other, drink coffee together, eat food together, and realize the commonality that they have.
Right.
And understand and become friends,
Right.
and then they kind of do the best work. So again, it's that intergenerational issue. So the teaching here to this week, of course, is important because it starts the process off of a new generation.
I think the history of how IISc was established was also very similar.
Yes.
In a conversation between Jamshedji Tata and Swami Vivekananda.
Yes, that's
where
right.
they sort of envisioned how a campus should be. And it was very green,
Absolutely.
and once you enter the campus, you're out of this world.
Yes.
You're just in that particular focused thought process.
That's right.
And I see that effect bearing on me because I've been new to IISc only since a month, and it's having a completely different effect on me.
Yes, yes.
Um,
But
Yes.
there's another part of the equation as well, and that other part of the equation is how you use science to the benefit of society.
Right.
I mean, I'm, Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society, and that's in Latin, and I can never remember the Latin, but basically it's one of the things that we say is our job is to help ensure that society gets benefit of the science that's done.
Right.
And of course that means also industry. We need to ensure that our industries have access to those new ideas, and so that they can use them and develop them. And so this is this translation of the science, and that's quite different. And I think, when campuses were set up, this idea of translating science was not so prevalent.
Right.
And now it is really at the fore of our thinking. So that balance is something that I feel that is our duty to ensure.
I think I've read you quote somewhere that in a current global condition, we need cooperation more than competition.
Yes.
And that's very important for the
Yes.
scientific community.
It is.
But do you think that's actually achievable, say, to the vast verticals of science that's possible today? Or do you think that global competition will always exist? Now, when you talk about international conflicts that are going on, sometimes you
Yes.
tend to have this philosophical question whether cooperation is actually achievable.
I mean, it depends. I mean, India and the UK are both democracies.
Yes.
And that's extremely important because it underpins the way that we fund science. It underpins the way that we give people access and equitable access to that science. And so, looking at the future, I would say, places like India and the UK working together, those bilateral relationships are going to be very important indeed. It doesn't mean that our companies do not have competitions, but actually when you start to look at it, the boundaries between the different companies can do some very interesting things. I mean, Tata now owns Land Rover Jaguar,
Yes.
for example, but the manufacturing and the design of those particular parts of Tata's activities is still in the UK.
Right.
Right. So when do you say this is an Indian company or is it a British company? And research on particular aspects of those vehicles goes on in India, and other aspects of that research goes on in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to sort of separate it out.
Right.
And underpinning that is because we're both democracies.
Right. That's very beautifully said. In fact, I was reading a quote on the Ministry of Science and Technology that an instance of collaboration was during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Indeed.
When the vaccines were developed in the UK, made in India, and distributed globally.
Yes, yes. And also developed in India as well. And
Yes.
also some of the manufacturing was in the UK because there were different components of
Yes.
those vaccines. So again, the story is often told in that way.
In a different way.
But
Yes.
actually it's more messy.
Yes.
It's more wound up than
Messy in a
is
very
often
good
said.
way.
Yeah, but in a very, very, no, absolutely, in a very good way. Yes.
Right. So what do you think are the possible areas in which perhaps there are shortcomings, or perhaps we have achieved quite a significant lot in terms of the collaboration between India and UK, and
Yes,
what's
yes.
the scope for the future?
Well, one of the things that I will be looking at very, very much, I've just become Foreign Secretary, and
Right.
it's a 5-year appointment, is ensuring that there's more equity in terms of UK students and postdocs coming to India, as well as Indian postdocs and students coming to the UK. I think it's tended to be towards the UK, and actually it must be also towards India.
Right.
A real partnership is about equity in access
Right.
and equity in development of programs together.
Right. And how can we increase this dialogue between two equals? Because right now there has been a communication gap. One may even say that there is a scope for more improvement.
There's always scope for improvement. There's no doubt whatsoever about that. But I don't like this. I don't like the phrase equals in this context, to be honest, because I I don't, when I'm doing science collaboration, I do it with an individual.
Right.
I talk to that individual, and that individual is not going to work with me unless they think that I'm not treating them as an equal.
Right.
So on an individual basis, I think that kind of equality may not have been so apparent during previous histories
Yes.
between our countries. I don't want colonial times.
But that's a norm
but
today.
that's a long time ago, and I think now we really do talk to each other as equals on an individual level. We've got to ensure that governments also, and that's you mentioned science diplomacy. One of the things that those collaborations, those friendships demonstrate to diplomats is the fact that we are talking to each other as equals.
Right.
So those ideas are possible, that we can discuss really quite sensitive things and make progress on, for example, space.
Right.
I mean, space is quite a sensitive issue,
Yes.
and yet we will be able to work together on the science of satellites, on the science of networks.
Yeah.
We can do that, and it gives the diplomatic people confidence that progress can be made.
Right. Professor, let's talk a little bit about the G20 summit that's going to happen
Yeah.
in India. It's the year for India's presidency.
Absolutely.
And one of the important verticals which perhaps will get a lot of recognition is the Science20 vertical of it.
We hope so. We'll see.
We certainly
We'll
hope
see.
so. And this interview is just the beginning of such efforts in the future. So in that sense, the theme is disruptive science for sustainable growth and development.
Absolutely.
So how would you view the term disruptive? Because we've gone through so many global events in the recent past. How is it relevant to India and the scientific community today?
So, I mean, the first thing I want to start with there is a recognition that, as you say, that India is hosting and India is in charge. So the sort of question immediately to me is, how can UK scientists be of service to India during its G20 science, or S20 as we say,
Yes.
activities? But it is utterly key to recognise that this year, it's India's party,
Yes.
as it were.
Yes.
All right. So we have to think about what is the service that we can provide, and actually that India is even interested in having us help is a really fantastic honour for us to be considered in this way. So that's the first and very important thing. And then you asked the question about disruptive.
Yes.
So, technologies are disruptive, but sometimes we don't recognise it.
Right.
And so I think there's an awful lot of unpacking that we've got to do. And there's a whole series of meetings starting in Pondicherry in, I think it is the end of January, isn't it?
Which we really hope you'll be there.
Well, I will do my best. I have looked at the flights, and I really am going to try to do
I'm
that.
putting you in a difficult position in front of the camera so that
no,
we get a
that's right.
promise
I
from
know
you.
that, and you know, so I hedged it because I literally I'm not quite sure I can make it, but I will do my best, and that
Right.
doesn't mean. I'm going to be very naughty back now. That's not a reply like a politician, which means no, I'm not. That actually really means I would really try to do
really
my
confident
best.
that you'll consider it.
Well, I will certainly do that. But it is very short notice, and we'll do our best.
Right.
But there's all the other meetings on all those other pathways to net zero. Who are the UK people who can come to hope to offer their thoughts and to support India in the statement that will eventually be made on pathways to net zero. And there are some really other interesting ones which are a little bit different, like, for example, science in the service of society.
Yes.
So what does that mean? It's such a broad issue and such a broad subject that obviously India is going to choose particular aspects of that to focus on.
Yes.
I mean, other ones like issues around climate change, the science is much talked about and we understand. So some of them are very precise, and some of them are going to take some work to understand exactly
Right.
what the emphasis will be. So again, we hope we're going to be of service in thinking about some of those
Some of the
things.
themes that, like you rightly said, are very unique to India in a way. For instance, connecting science to society and culture.
And
We've
culture,
had
yes.
We've had a very big legacy of India's contribution to science in the past, which dates back to millennial.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And in a very unique way.
Yeah, and I don't think the world knows very much about it. So this
No.
is our chance to tell our bit of the story.
Absolutely, absolutely, and a very interesting part of it is as well. So all the other countries have got a lot to learn, right? And what does that really mean when you unpack it? Again, I think we're going to be on a journey together on this.
And what do you think could be the UK's role in the G20, as a body by itself?
So I'm part of the Royal Society, and so we have access to scientists from all over the world. So actually, I suspect that we will be offering, options for India in terms of expertise, but they won't all be British passport holders, and they won't all be based in the UK.
Right.
We hope we will be able to bring opportunities for people from other places in the world,
right,
who are associated with the Royal Society to make this support. So it's back to the sort of science excellence issue, making sure that we offer the best people from wherever they are from.
We were talking about the collaboration between international, between countries, especially India and the UK during the time of the pandemic.
Yes.
And the collaborations essentially made a lot of changes in terms of the global supply chain as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of even semiconductors, for instance, India is witnessing a lot of changes.
Yes.
And we don't know how it's going to shape out in the next few years.
Well, it's a hot topic.
Yes, but there is a lot of development in terms of announcements of new manufacturing hubs and things like that. So where do you see this going, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important issue, and it's an issue, again, where you've got the application and development of scientific activities and how they move into the supply chain. I mean, semiconductors is a really good example because, the world condensed and condensed and condensed down in terms of its manufacturing of semiconductors, and really ended up with Taiwan as very dominant in silicon production. I mean, the other semiconductors may be less so, particularly the compound semiconductors. But certainly for silicon, Taiwan produces something like 85% of the world's silicon.
Right.
And having that in one place, particularly in an area which is so geopolitically vulnerable for obvious reasons, is clearly a very bad thing. And I think one of the things that COVID did is it made people realize that you can't have all your vaccines produced in one place.
Right.
You need a distribution for resilience. And it's this resilience word. And it's suddenly become very clear as well, I think, for semiconductors.
Right.
So the US is going to certainly develop its technology capability. I mean, it's very interesting actually, because it's not really about the patents, it's not really about the technology, it's about the know-how.
Right.
It's those people who really know how to produce those balls of silicon again and again.
Right.
But there are other semiconductors, like, as I said, the compound semiconductors, the indium phosphides, the gallium arsenides, and all these other exotic sounding materials.
Yeah.
They're also important from a point of view of sensors.
Right.
And as time goes on, we're more and more dependent on sensor technologies.
Right.
So I think there's going to be partnerships developing, and certainly the UK is considering about how it is involved in this whole semiconductor issue.
As far as clean energy is concerned, and this is quite a bit of a deviation from where we were.
Well, except that silicon, of course, is the basis of solar cells, so it's not quite such a deviation. But go on.
Yes, and if I may just add on,
course.
India has taken initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, which is now becoming a global movement.
Yes.
And it's growing very well. And I think there is a recognition and an acknowledgement even in India's public and the public sphere that clean energy is very important, especially to mitigate the climate crisis, and also to reduce our dependency on different sorts of fuels.
Yes.
So in that sense, what is the challenge ahead of us as a global community and even for a country like India?
So, we're back to this issue about engineering challenges are systems-based issues.
Right.
So in terms of renewable energy in particular, the sun shines, you have solar cells, they produce electricity. During night, there isn't any sun, so they can't be producing any. For us, we have a lot of wind power, but again, it's intermittent. It's not quite as predictable as day and night even. So there's a slightly different problem. So how do you put the solar issues, the wind issues, together with batteries and battery storage, and from my point of view also nuclear, you've got a systems approach that you need to develop in order to understand what gives you resilience. Again, so engineering resilience and shared understanding of engineering resilience is going to be much more, I think, at the heart of these sorts of collaborations.
You know, speaking about mitigating climate crisis, I saw a quote of yours very recently published in a news article, which said that, you know, a possible breakthrough in nuclear fusion can be a possible solution for this. So for the layman who does not understand what this means, could you please explain?
Sure. So fusion energy has an incredible possibility in thousands and thousands of years of energy with much reduced impact on the environment. It's not zero. Anybody who ever says that you produce energy without any impact is fooling themselves. There is an impact, but it's much reduced. And the fuel is readily recyclable within the system. There are different ways of doing it. The recent breakthrough shows that one way that we were not clear was possible is absolutely possible, but the engineering challenge is still there. We need the materials that can withstand the incredible temperatures, the radiation fields that nuclear is always associated with, even this less impactful form of nuclear. And we don't have those yet. So there's a heck of a lot of engineering to do, which will take decades. But it's a question always, is the gain, is the prize worth the effort? Right. You're always balancing, you know, prize and effort throughout everything we do. And it's the same for this sort of energy. And I would argue that the prize is worth this colossal international collaborative effort. And it's a great example and will involve the UK. We are absolutely at the heart of that. India is also going to be at the heart of this. And it's a great example of why and where we should be collaborating together.
Is there any message that you would like to give to India ahead of, you know, the G20 year, especially with Science20 summits, you know, starting from January? It's going to be huge for us because S20 as a vertical is very new. It was started in 2017, and I think it comes at the right time when S&T required that push in a country like India.
Actually, I would almost ask the question the other way around, and I ask you, what does India want and how can we be of service? Because it is India's party and it's for us, as I've said before, to make sure that we are delivering what India wants for its initiatives.
We'll get to know after the conclusion of the year, once we have all the summits going on and the side meetings going on. But Sir Robin Grimes, it's such an honor to meet you and have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for being such a good friend of India, and please do keep visiting Bangalore as often as you can.
And vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please do let us know what you thought about it. And if you have any questions, please do comment down in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sir Robin Grimes. Obviously, we covered a lot of territory, but due to a paucity of time, we could not have an extended conversation. But whenever he's here next, we will be having a conversation following this up as well. And we'll be having more such conversations in the future as India takes over the presidency of the G20. It's very important year for India in terms of achieving a lot of its global ambitions. And I think Science20 is one of the verticals which will add to the aura of India's global achievements in the future. Please do stay tuned to the S20 website and the Twitter handle and various other platforms that are out there to keep yourself updated about what exactly is happening. Do let us know what you thought about this interview in the comment section below. This is your host Sharan Sethi signing off for the S20 Secretariat at the Indian Institute of Science.